freezing cold waters of Loch Ness are deep, dark, and home to a monstrous mystery. People claim to have spotted it thousands of times. Locals, tourists, even a saint. But what are they seeing? Frightening, fascinating. Some say it's even been caught on film, but it's never been captured by nets. Is there really a terrifying beast alive deep in this mysterious Scottish lake? Or does it just exist in our imaginations? The Loch Ness Monster is coming for you, next on Truth or Scare. North of England, in Scotland, a huge mysterious creature lives in a remote lake. They call it the Loch Ness Monster. But is it just a story? Over 3,000 people claim they've seen the monster with their own eyes, but non-believers say that's just not enough evidence to prove it exists. Who's right? There's only one way to find out. Visit the Highlands of Scotland and head straight for the most mysterious lake in history, Loch Ness. But could a lake really be hiding a secret as gigantic as the monster some call Nessie? This lake could. It's 24 miles long and 800 feet deep. That's deep enough to put a 50-story building completely underwater. So who knows what could be living down there? The mystery started about 1,500 years ago, when a traveling monk got shock of his life. The year was 565 AD. Saint Columba, a holy man who was wandering the British Isles, stopped to pray at the edge of Loch Ness. Suddenly, he claimed that something, like a long-necked horse, came rising out of the waves. The monk was terrified. He held up a cross, almost like he was fighting a vampire, and yelled, "Stop! Go thou no further, nor touch man." Then, according to the story, the monster backed off and dove back down into the cold, dark water. Since then, plenty of other people claim to have seen things in the lake. Things that convince them the monster is still there, alive and well after all these years. In 1933, one shocking news story got the whole world wondering. A British newspaper reported giant footprints on the shore of the loch. A big game hunter named Marmaduke Wetherell said he'd found the prints, and the newspaper took it from there. If it were true, it would have been the biggest story of the century, and scientists from the British Museum of Natural History rushed out to examine the evidence. Their conclusion? The footprints were proof positive of a hoax. It turns out Marmaduke was playing a prank. The prints in the sand were made with a stuffed hippopotamus foot. But just because one story is fiction doesn't mean other reports can't be true. Only 1 year later, monster hunters everywhere got what some say was the first good look at Nessie. On April 19, 1934, Dr. Robert Wilson went hiking with a friend around Loch Ness. It's a good thing the doctor brought his camera, because according to him, this was the day that the monster decided to come up for air. Dr. Wilson couldn't believe his eyes. He took pictures as fast as he could and hoped that just one of them would turn out well. He got his wish. And there it is, in black and white. a long neck coming up from the deep. Monster, head and all. Finally, proof that the stories about the monster were true. But many still weren't convinced. They claimed the picture was a fake. And in recent years, a reliable source released information claiming that the famous surgeon's photo was nothing more than a piece of carved wood on top of a toy submarine. At the center of the prank was none other than famed Nessie hoaxer Marmaduke Wetherell. It was starting to look like the only way to prove that Nessie existed was to go get her. Although the monster seemed to stay well hidden for decades, by the 1960s, scientists were also starting to get interested in Nessie. Tim Dinsdale was one of the first researchers to lead an all-out expedition into the unknown. He loaded up his movie camera and hit the shores of Loch Ness. People wanted hard evidence that the monster existed, and Tim believed he could get it. On April 23, 1960, he says he did just that. That day, Tim saw a strange shape was moving across the lake, and he was ready for it. He followed the unbelievable sight with his camera, capturing it on film forever. It stopped, turned, and then swam off to the other side of the lake. Is this in fact the head of the monster as it swims away, or just another hoax? The world's greatest monster hunter gets real deep as he searches for answers on the bottom of the lake. Next on Truth or Scare. Reports come in all the time about strange sightings in the lake. But sightings of what, exactly? Plenty of people want to uncover the truth about Loch Ness, but who's brave enough to go looking for it? Real-life monster hunters, that's who. Dr. Robert Rines is president of the Academy of Applied Science. As a cryptozoologist, Dr. Rines studies mythical creatures and just happens to be the world's foremost expert on the Loch Ness monster. And for him, there's no doubt about it, the monster exists. But Dr. Rines doesn't just rely on photographic evidence. He claims that when he was visiting a friend at the lake, he saw the monster with his own eyes.
Basil went out to get his pipe. And he says, "Oh, I say, that can't be an upturned boat." And we all rushed out of the living room. We grabbed binoculars, and there we saw a big back of an animal.
An animal he'd never seen before, about 25 feet long. For more than 10 minutes, he stared through his binoculars at the lake, watching the monster surface and then disappear again under the freezing waves. After experiencing the monster for himself, Dr. Rines realized that the Loch Ness monster could be one of the most important discoveries of our time. So Dr. Rines decided to prove once and for all that the mysterious Loch Ness monster was alive. It was 1970. Dr. Rines put together a team of specialists and experienced deep-sea divers and led them down into the unknown of Loch Ness. To find the monster, they needed state-of-the-art technology, so the team's boat was equipped with strobe lights and sonar. The waters of Loch Ness are dark and murky, the perfect hiding place for a monster. So Dr. Rines used the sonar equipment to send sound waves out into the deep waters. Then, using the echoes they made, he could actually take pictures in total darkness. Unfortunately, the 1970 mission failed. No sightings or pictures of Nessie. But just 2 years later, Dr. Rines gave it another shot. 1972, the middle of a clear August night. The monster hunters had just lowered their cameras into the lake.
And all of a sudden, the fish started to jump out of the water. And by golly, that was the extraordinary luck we had that year. We got a number of those pictures of big animals or parts of animals.
The pictures weren't clear at first, but by using special photo techniques, he managed to clean up the pictures and revealed an unbelievable image. It was the shape of a huge diamond-shaped flipper. It was the kind of evidence Dr. Rines had always hoped for, and now it looked like he finally had it.
Think of it, flipper, like a hand, anywhere from 4 to 6 feet long. And that's a pretty big animal that has a flipper like that. It looked like the kind of flipper that used to be on underwater dinosaurs called plesiosaurs, which we're told were dead 65 million years ago. So the mystery deepens.
Extinct for millions of years, or alive and well in Scotland. If he was right, the doctor's discovery would be truly historic. But it was just one blurry photo. Then, a few years later, in 1975, another photo was taken, and this one looked like the whole body of a plesiosaur.
This is the publication in Nature magazine, scientific journal, showing the body, the long neck, the head, and the mouth, which has the shape of an elasmosaurus or a plesiosaur.
Was this the answer to thousands of sightings over the years? There's only one way to find out. Prehistoric monsters come back to life, and the mystery of Loch Ness gets even bigger. Next on Truth or Scare. The most famous lake in Scotland is home to legendary stories and maybe even a monster straight out of the age of dinosaurs. Plesiosaurs haven't been seen alive for over 60 million years, but some monster hunters claim one of these ancient marine reptiles is living in Loch Ness. At the end of the Mesozoic age, the Earth was totally dominated by the dinosaurs. But the oceans were ruled by the plesiosaurs. This was 70 million years ago, way before evolution started working on humans. Fast forward to the modern world, and humans are all over the place. But to see a plesiosaur, you've got to check out the Natural History Museum. Does Marinosaurus look familiar? Way back when, it lived in the Pacific Ocean along the coast of California. But don't call it a fish. Paleontologists know that plesiosaurs, like this one, were water-loving reptiles, like crocodiles. And their swimming skills came from giant flippers. Now do you recognize Marinosaurus? Some say it looks a lot like Dr. Ryan's photo. And guess what? Plesiosaurs sometimes had to come up for air, which would explain why there have been so many sightings at the surface of Loch Ness. But how in the world could an ancient sea creature still be alive today? It wouldn't be the first time. Not too long ago, some fishermen off the coast of South Africa caught a fish called a coelacanth. Only one problem: the coelacanth was extinct. Or that's what everyone thought. But paleontologists know that once in a while, animals from the ancient past can, in a way, come back to life. Dr. J.D. Stewart is an expert at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles.
Coelacanth is a good example. Now, in that case, we didn't know that they were alive. We knew 150 years ago, we knew them as fossils. And it wasn't until about 50 years ago that we found out they were still alive, and that was quite remarkable.
And Dr. Stewart says there are also still plenty of new species in the ocean just waiting to be discovered. Emery Christoph agrees. He's an underwater photographer, and he thinks we've only just begun to see what's lurking near the ocean floor.
I think it's very fair comment that we know more about the backside of the moon than we do about the bottom of the ocean. This is the water planet. We have maybe looked at 1% of the bottom of the ocean right now.
And what about the bottom of Loch Ness? It's 800 feet below the surface. Is it hiding an ancient reptile? Or maybe even a totally new, undiscovered species? A dive to the bottom of Loch Ness would be nothing to Emery. He's gone as deep as 6,000 feet. Way down there, he's seen new kinds of sharks that no one's even heard of. Big ones.
The largest meat-eating sharks, you don't see them. I mean, they're down there at 4,000 and 6,000 feet. Those sharks in the deep ocean would make a great white look like a guppy.
Emery's run into sharks as big as 28 feet, as long as a school bus. Pretty terrifying. But back in their day, plesiosaurs ate sharks like fish sticks. Plesiosaurs' teeth were deadly weapons. They were designed to close and lock down on all victims. Get bitten, and there was no escape. So if Nessie is a prehistoric predator, we know one thing. There would have to be tons of fish in the murky depths of Loch Ness for it to survive all this time. Emery Christoph says the lake is filled with a fish called Arctic char, which would be just fine with a plesiosaur.
There are enough Arctic char in Loch Ness really to feed any number of large animals, and that is the basis for a food chain.
Is science getting closer to an answer? Is the ancient Scottish lake really a plesiosaurus playground? Or is the legend of Loch Ness just sucking more people in? Emery Christoph explores the bottom of Loch Ness in search of the truth and barely escapes with the scare of his life. Next on Truth or Scare. Witnesses have been telling stories about the Loch Ness Monster since the Middle Ages. Could they be true? Could Nessie actually be real? Or were people just seeing what they wanted to see? That's exactly what Emery Christoph thinks happened with Dr. Ryan's picture.
I think that the camera actually, in some bad weather, was dragged on the bottom, and the camera fell down on the side. It was shooting sideways on the bottom. It looks like it's a pebbly brown, and it looks to me like the bottom of the lake.
Emery has been a deep-sea photographer for years, so he knows his stuff. If this picture is just the bottom of the lake, well, then maybe there's no monster after all. According to him, there could be other explanations for all the best photographs of Nessie. When a boat goes by, it leaves ripples in the water called a wake. He believes those ripples are the humps that people see. But when Emery went diving in the lake to check it out for himself, he did get a creepy feeling. A feeling that he had company.
You're waiting for something to tap you on the shoulder back here. I mean, it was very spooky. It was very spooky diving.
Ralph White knows exactly what Emery's talking about. He still remembers the night he was diving in Loch Ness with Emery. The night they almost didn't make it back to shore.
I think the spookiest we ever got at Loch Ness was very late one night, and everybody was real apprehensive about going into Loch Ness at night, which is the normal feeding time for most animals. When I flipped off the boat, I remember going underwater, and it was pitch black.
Suddenly, Ralph and Emery were hit by something powerful enough to knock off their diving masks. They headed straight for the surface, terrified that they wouldn't make it. What was it? Luckily, they got a photograph of the attacker. At last, evidence of Loch Ness's historic secret. Or not. It turned out to be nothing but an eel. Emery isn't giving up hope, though.
It could be hibernating. I mean, it may have gone south to Florida. There's all sorts of things. So just because you don't see it for a few years, that doesn't mean that maybe it has a sleep cycle.
And the other experts are right there with him. Paleontologist J.D. Stewart is looking forward to seeing his favorite monster again.
I think that as long as people continue to report unidentified animals in Loch Ness, I think the search for Nessie should continue.
And the most famous monster hunter of them all is getting ready for another deep safari. Because as big as Loch Ness is, Dr. Rines believes there's always plenty of room for this shy monster to hide. And probably just as much room for our imaginations to run wild. Could thousands of witnesses for almost 1,500 years just be seeing things they want to see? Or is the Loch Ness monster real? Could it be a totally new animal species, or maybe a link from Earth's prehistoric past? Unfortunately, we're not much closer to an answer than the day Saint Columba claims he saw something in the waters of Loch Ness. And anytime the truth is this murky, be careful. You might just find a good scare anywhere.